Well, Lyle, it's been a while since we've been up on this platform sharing one of our conversations. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we've been busy in the background building Heroes Unleashed and really putting some great things in place. But you yourself are also dealing with a new challenge, one that you're familiar with actually. And I was wondering if you'd be willing to share with everybody what's going on in your life.
Yeah, I was recently diagnosed with prostate cancer, and I'm right now undergoing hormone therapy, and I now can empathize with women and hot flashes because I've been getting them. So, um, initially it's a kick in the nuts, no pun intended, but um, I've beat cancer twice before, so I just gotta had to get back into that headspace about how I'm going to do that this time, and yeah, I think I kind of crossed over to that earlier this week where I said, okay, now, quit being a suck and get on with it. So, yeah, my headspace is back where it needs to be. You can take stuff and I just saw that with my wife, where she immediately the second time just sort of gave up and accepted it. But I've never been a good rules guy, so I don't accept stuff quite as easily. And um, I'm very optimistic. It's a little more advanced than we initially thought, but that's okay. Um, the next step after it, I got to start tomorrow with another round of the hormone therapy. Um, but and the first go around, they give you a pretty significant needle in the belly. Not a fan of that. And then it's just these pills every day, and so now I have to go through another 30 days of the pills, and then they'll come up with the next steps, which is probably going to be some targeted radiation. And again, I kind of the headspace is, I can beat this one too. So it's never easy, um, but they say three strikes and you're out, but sometimes they say three times lucky. So I picked that one. And
Yeah.
yeah, um,
So what was interesting to me is whenever I talk to you, you're a pretty straight shooter. You don't hold the punches back. There's been a couple times where we had some moments both on the ride and even when we talk about things like donations and you're a very straight shooter, this is what you have to do, Matt. I know it sucks. Nobody cares. Get out there, get to work, reframe this. You take control, you take charge, you go get it done. When I first talked to you about this, it's the first time I could sense, Lyle's definitely not his old self. 2 weeks later, we have a chance to meet up, and you are a completely different person. What goes on in your mind? What switch gets thrown when you decide enough's enough? It's time to fight the fight.
well, I think you just come to a realization that there's only two ways to handle it: you give up or you fight. And I've got experience with the fight part, and so you go with what you know. Um, I think I'm probably a lot of oncologists' worst nightmare because I'm pretty skeptical of what they say a lot of times, and I don't hold back on letting them know that. So, I've already told the guys at the cross that I'm not buying what you're selling at this point, but I might someday. I doubt it. And for me, it's really, yeah, it's fight or flight. You only got two chances to make the right decision, or you got one chance to make the right decision, but only two to choose from. And, I think in cancer cases, that's something that they don't talk enough about. But I think a lot of it is how you mentally handle it. And I've seen it. I've seen it different ways. I've seen lots of people who get diagnosed, and like I say with my wife, that they just give up. And that's easy. I mean, I respect that decision if that's what they want to do, but it's not my time for that. And um, I just had lunch with a guy who, an ex Edmonton Oiler and tough guy, and he basically said the same thing. Like, you're always tough, so why would we expect anything different this time? So,
Yeah.
uh, and that's the reality. And um, the other day, I was at a Oiler alumni lunch and Brian Hall was sitting with me, and Halsey's in his 90s now, still sharp as a tack. He just retired from radio after 70 years on the air. And again, very positive, optimistic outlook. And I thought back to, and I know I've spoken to you about Wild Bill Hunter before, but he went through this journey with prostate cancer. When the doctor told him, he was very blunt and said, you really don't have a lot of time left, and this is terminal. And then the doctor said to me when we were in the hallway at the hospital, "How's he going to handle that?" And I said, "Well, how are you going to handle it?" And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, he ain't going to die till he's ready." And he's far from ready. And it was really like close to 5 years. And I next took up with the doctor at Bill's funeral. And he says, "Yeah, you know what? You taught me a good lesson." He says, "You were right. Not everybody's the same." And so with Bill, I saw all the fight that he had right up to the end, right up to the last minutes of his life, actually. And, that was very inspirational. And sometimes you don't know that you're being inspired until you do a sort of a retrospective. And so I found myself this past 3-4 weeks really going back to that time with
Yeah.
Bill and relating to what he went through. They just recently changed a lot of my medication to morphine, and on the surface, that's pretty scary shit, but it works. The idea, though, that I don't, near the end, Bill was chewing morphine like they were Tic Tacs, and I don't want to ever get to that. But again, if that's what it comes to, that's what it comes to. The big thing too is to try and stay ahead of the pain, um, because then your mind fixates on the pain and not on the healing part.
Yeah.
So, not a lot different than when you were on the bike and you needed the butt cream to calm you down after a couple of days of riding. So,
It's funny you say that because I was actually chatting with Chelsea about this. We were talking about this update that you had, and I said what's really interesting about this is that even before I observed the mindset that you demonstrated in this current challenge, I observed it on day one of my ride. I said I was miserable, I was going to quit. Then you threw me the lifeline, you called me, you talked me through it, and you changed my mindset. And what I said to Chelsea is what I want people to understand is that when we talk about helping people thrive, it's because your philosophy and my philosophy around mindset are baked into the DNA of Heroes Unleashed. Not everybody is like Lyle, and not everybody is like me. We're not going to all ride 13,000 kilometers, but we can all learn a little bit about this mindset. And you're so right when you said it, it is the mind, it is our biggest muscle. And if we learn how to recruit it and work with it, obstacles like the one you're dealing with, or cycling across Canada feeling broken pretty much every day, can be overcome if we learn how to recruit the mind. And that's why I'm so proud to have your DNA embedded into the philosophy of Heroes Unleashed, because I think that's where a lot of this whole we can do anything we set our mind to came from. So I don't know if
well, it's a very transferable skill too, and it transfers easily into. Biggest problem for entrepreneurs is that you know they can get down on themselves. They can stop believing in the idea that they had. And I can honestly say that that never happened to me. I mean, yeah, I had lots of internal committee meetings, but I was also the chairman of my own committee meetings, so I could mute myself when I needed to. Um, but yeah, it's something that it's very transferable. It has when they told me that I couldn't do the stuff I was about to embark on, that just motivated me more.
Yeah.
And and I even remember coming home telling my wife that I was going to get this job, and she said, "How much does it pay?" I said, "About a third of what I make now." And well, who's the competition? They're all Great West Life and Manulife and Blue Cross. And she said, "Yeah, your mind." And I said, "Probably," but I always thought it would work. And in fact, I was at the golf course at lunch, and I ran into Ray Pisani, who used to be the CEO of Blue Cross. A lot of people thought we were mortal enemies, but we weren't. We learned how to work together in the same environment. He's a very supportive guy, um, and Italian, empathetic, and so we had a good chat at lunch. Yeah, and I think when people see you do that, um, they get like when we got hacked by these Russian hackers. Um, I mean, obviously it was devastating, very expensive, but I had staff meeting every day, and sometimes twice a day or three times a day to keep them up to date. Nothing worse than sitting there and you don't have any control, but you also don't know what's happening. So um, that's a management style that not all my senior managers shared. And quite frankly, I was able to do those staff meetings because the senior managers who didn't know how to do their schedules properly were all gone. Like one was on a cruise and one was getting married. So somebody had to do it, and I'd done it before. But when they came back, they weren't as willing to share, and that caused a lot of anxiety in the office.
Yeah.
Again, like Wild Bill didn't know that he was inspiring me, just as I didn't know that I was inspiring some of my staff through that crisis. But yeah, they found out pretty soon that all they really wanted was communication, and that's one thing that bad managers don't do well. They don't communicate. Um, they don't uh, delegate, and uh, nobody wins in that situation. The company doesn't win, the manager doesn't win, the staff doesn't win. So it's just about you know believing in what you're doing and sharing it. And again, communication is the key. Um, I never. That's how I got to know a lot of my employees. To, they would usually ask me, well, "Why are we supporting this charity or that charity?" And I said to them numerous times, "Well, if you got a charity you want me to support, let me know and let me know why." And so then, that's not as invasive as saying, "Tell me about how screwed up your kid is." Uh, they willingly volunteer that, and so they also felt a part of our corporate giving because they knew they had some influence in it.
So in that regards, Lyle, you mentioned this whole communication, delegation. So one of the things that we've talked about before, and again, we built into the DNA of Heroes Unleashed, is this idea of corporate culture. You've often told me stories about understanding who your employees are, understanding their problems, their aspirations. When they're having a bad day, you actually take time to find out, what's going on in their lives. You were able to walk the hallways and talk to your employees, and you built this incredible culture. How important do you think it is to build that high performance culture? And more importantly, how difficult do you think it is for companies to do that are say bigger than 30, 40, 50? They can't all do what you did, walk through the halls and get to know people. How important do you think a tool like this assessment we're using is to help companies do what you did through time and effort?
Well, it's really like you got to create a lot of allies, and you have to inspire your next level of management to do that kind of thing. Um, for me, yeah, it was, um, and this happens everywhere. You got an employee who's not performing well, and it can have sometimes nothing to do with the job at all. could be, usually is actually something in their home life or whatever. If you can get to that, then you can support them and help them. I've often had young managers who come to me and say, "I want to fire that person," and I say, "Why?" And they tell me, and I go, "Well, what's going on at their house?" I don't know. Maybe that's the key. Maybe you got to find out, and don't go storming into their office and tell me what's going on at home. There's nicer and easier ways to do it and more effective. So I had very good managers that accepted that philosophy, and I could tell early on if they were going to be a keeper or a good manager because they would, engage their employees, their staff, their reports, and I could also tell sometimes not even observing their management style. I just observe their staff, and if the staff was shutting down, I know why they're shutting down. Ironically, it could be something in that manager's home life that's causing this grief, or some self-doubt, especially when they're young managers and they're just, you know, feeling their way through. Um, it's not always about the job site. It's not always about the job. It's more likely to be the home life or the life decisions that they've made. Um, I've had employees who were, alcoholics or drug addicts, and I didn't cause that. I mean, my environment didn't cause that. So, they had to take responsibility for what was making them do those things. Um, but I wasn't prepared to take any blame for it. I mean, I'm not making you drink. I'm not making you, you know, smoke dope. If that's how you've chosen to cope, that's your choice. But, you got to live with the consequences of that. So,
Do you think, Lyle, if the way you did it was the way you did it, it was the Lyle best way and it was successful. But do you think with what we've created in creating these assessments to help organizations determine if their employees are actually thriving, if their leaders are thriving, do you think having access to these type of assessments and then depending on the assessment outcomes, what we offer as tools to help employees and cultures thrive, would you as a leader today find something like that incredibly valuable?
yeah, because quite frankly, most of the time you don't know what you don't know. And, if you have to have somebody point it out to you, um, that's a double learning experience. The first thing you think about is how did I miss that? Um, I've worked for all kinds of people, and I see it in the military too. You could tell the good leaders in the military by how the enlisted people react to them. And I've seen the typical U.S. Marine drill sergeant types, and those people are responding, but they're responding out of fear. They're not responding out of we got a joint purpose here or whatever. Again, you can tell early on by looking at that segment of the troops how good their leader is and how inspiring that leader is. And it's the same in business.
Lyle, most companies invest a tremendous amount of money in sort of the traditional training of employees or new technology, or they do some process engineering. And they get this slightly better yesterday. Yeah, we're a bit more efficient, we're a bit more effective. We believe that if we help the individual thrive, it'll create thriving teams. It will create thriving leaders, and this will create this high performance culture. How important do you think helping people thrive is to creating that high performance culture versus the traditional means of let's just give them some training, let's just give them some new technology, let's just re-engineer our business processes? How much importance do you put on creating these thriving human beings?
You know, early on, like early on, 40 years ago, um, I was exposed to employee assistance programs. Um, to me, I could have gone out and bought a faster computer for them, a smarter phone system. But coming back to when I said you don't know what's going on in their home life, uh, to me, it was important to give them a tool that could improve that. And so I've been a big proponent of EAPs. We've always had them at my workplace. I moved them into when I chaired the board of the dentist insurance company. I made sure that element was there for dentists because they were committing suicide at an alarming rate. They were going bankrupt when they shouldn't have because they had a huge cash flow. Um, and again, you got to give them the tools to make that part of their life improve before before their dental practices would improve or whatever you're trying to get for them. I did everything that was trendy for a while. It was TQM, total quality management, and then all these designations, and I don't even remember what half of them were, but I do know that most of them didn't have any staying power. It's like when you go to see a motivational speaker like Tony Robbins or someone like that, and you come out and you're pumped like hell, and this is amazing. And then 2 days later, you can't remember what the guy said. You just know that something, he pushed some buttons and it motivated you, but it didn't last because he didn't tell you how to get to that place. A lot of them are say, look at me, look what I've done. Well, how did you do it? You can not tell me that. Wayne Dyer was another one that was great, but his message was always how he got there and why he did it. And so you got to give them the tools to understand who they are, why they are the way they are. And I saw a movie 50 years ago. It's called You Are What You Were When. And it talks about when your value systems get set. Um, Literally, it's by like the age of 5 or 6 that a lot of your inner values are set. And again, you don't understand it. That's it. My mom and stepfather were pretty independently wealthy at the end of their time, but I couldn't get them to spend a nickel because they always thought, well, what if something happens? Yeah, if I go back to You Are What You Were When, they grew up in the Depression.
Mhm.
They saw what could happen. Now they never let go of that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's Lyle, you said it in a kind of a different way than I would say it, but what you're saying is absolutely true. Today we call these maps. They're wired into our brains at a very young age. They run in the background constantly. They shape our behavior. And if we try to fight those maps, it feels uncomfortable, and we just want to default back to where we're most comfortable, whether that's depression, drinking too much, smoking, putting on too much weight. We don't want to feel uncomfortable. We want to rely on those old comfortable maps. So you're absolutely right. We have to rewire people so that they have a new set of values and supporting maps to help them change their life. So it's really interesting that you say that.
I think it's just interesting because there's how many business books are out there. I'm sure Matt's read a million of them. I have too. I'm sure you have. How many of them lead with, and I'm paraphrasing you, so correct me, a chunk of my success, and there has been enormous amounts of it, I can attribute to my ability to empathize, care, and mindset, right? It's a very
That's
special thing about
that's true. And I want to say normal people do, but that might offend someone. But it's pretty normal to relate to someone who's going through some tough times. And to me, it's abnormal to not react to them. Yeah, it has to be a touchstone in your life to have empathy, and you don't have to have a personal relationship with whatever it is that's causing it. You just have to have the human relationship. So sickle cell anemia is a good example. It's predominantly an African American disease. I'm not going to be personally impacted by it, but I can relate to the families reacting when one of their kids gets sickle cell anemia because it's human. I don't know the answer to all these things except awareness and just be aware of it. So be aware of what's going on and how you would react if the same thing was happening to you. And if you can't get past that, you probably not going to be very successful in anything you do. And we all know negative people. I've been, a lot of people say to me, you've had a great life or you've had a horrible life. And I said, well, I have a horrible life. Well, you lost a child, your wife's dead, you got cancer a few times. But I always think I had a pretty lucky life. I traveled all over the world. I've done great things, stuff I never would have imagined I'd be doing. And so, yeah, from the outside, it could look like I've had a really rough go, but I don't feel that. I just put those thoughts out of my head. And I could, if I was a Debbie Downer, I could write a country western song about, my wife left, the dog died, and all the rest of the things. But no, I don't dwell on that. So I think that's another key to the mindset that you have to be successful.